And now, here's your host, Christian apologist, Bob Siegel.
And this is Bob Siegel. So, you'd like to believe in God, but you wonder why a loving God would not keep our world safer, particularly from guns. Well, my friend, God is not the one firing guns at people, but he did command us not to murder. When I see murder, it does not suggest to me that God doesn't exist or is unloving. It instead suggests that God knew what he was talking about when he issued his wise commands and prohibitions. God also gave us a brain and instructed us to make laws which punish cold-blooded killers, not laws which punish those who want to defend themselves. By the way, the most outspoken advocates for gun control do not practice gun control. When the Democratic politicians and the Hollywood elitists discontinue their own personal armed bodyguards, then they can lecture the rest of us who may not be able to afford such paid protection. Then they can tell us about firearms. Oh, wait, I almost forgot. Even in such a case, there would still be such a thing as the Second Amendment, period. FYI, I do not personally carry a firearm. Neither am I a member of the NRA. Just somebody who actually reads the Constitution. Now, speaking of gun control, anyone with an ounce of sensitivity would agree that the students from the Parkland, Florida high school, after witnessing 17 casualties from amongst their friends and teachers, had a right to speak out and say anything they wanted. They may not have all made reasonable points, but we can cut them some slack anyway. They were traumatized. For them, this thing is entirely emotional and very understandingly so. We should take that into consideration. However, and it's a significant however, stepping back from that particular event, I would like to talk about this week's nationwide student walkout. While sparked by the publicity of Parkland, it involved students from all over the country. You know what I'm referring to, right? That special protest described as being organic, but actually organized and fueled to a large degree from organizations such as Women's March and George Soros, putting aside the disingenuous way the mainstream media has reported this, and forgetting for a moment that we would hear no such praise if students were protesting on behalf of a pro-life cause or any other conservative stance, I would like to address the conventional wisdom about how we need to listen to our youth. The kids know. You always hear that kids will tell you, parents, listen to your kids. Okay, I guess somebody needs to say this. It may as well be me. With few exceptions, teenagers don't know jack about what's going on in the world. I mean, who are we kidding? I certainly didn't when I was a teen, and I see fleeting evidence that much is different today, other than the fact that while in the past, we at least heard more educated opinions from late teen, early 20s college students than high school students, that is no longer true today. In fact, given the state of our present-day university, it's almost a coin toss to determine which ones sound worse. Nevertheless, the drumbeat goes on. The kids get it! Not like us stuffy adults, brown-beaten, spineless, intimidated adults march in step so as not to appear behind the times. I remember hearing the same thing in 2008 when Obama was running. Listen to our young. They know. They'll tell you. I actually heard parents on the news admit that they were voting for Obama because their kids were telling them to. We need to listen to them. I did listen to them. I listened to a lot of them. I remember hearing one particular college student who approached me after one of my sermons when I was guest speaking at his church. The guy was enthusiastic about Obama. Gotta support the Obama, he said with pride. Yes, you heard that correctly. Not Obama, the Obama. He might as well have said the Messiah. Change, he shouted gleefully, repeating Obama's popular campaign slogan. Change for what? I asked. The startled student had apparently never been asked this unexpected question. Thinking quickly, he said, change for the better, and then walked away from me just as fast as he could. Not long after that, I spoke with a female student on a plane trip literally one day after the 2008 election, she too had voted for Obama. When I asked her why, she said, "Oh, I don't know. I just get a good vibe from him." A good vibe. I asked her if she understood anything about his policies. She admitted that she did not, but confessed her own ideology. "I'm a libertarian." I was forced to point out that she had voted for somebody whose policies could not possibly be more on the opposite side of the spectrum of a libertarian. Yes, folks, listen to the teens and college students. Youth! The kids get it. The kids will tell you. The kids know. Let's take our cues from the kids. By the way, in the interest of fairness, there are also a lot of idiotic adults. Speaking of which, have you noticed that many of the same people who expressed concern that Russia tampered with the election, a concern they didn't seem to have until Trump was elected, have you noticed that those same people are against voter ID, which could prevent all kinds of non-citizens from election tampering? This will be big in our next presidential election if potential candidates such as Elizabeth Warren can first get past the accusation that she had lied about her heritage. If Elizabeth Warren was smart, she'd concede the debate over truly being Cherokee and instead insist that whatever she feels she is in her heart is her true identity. How many PC liberals would be allowed to disagree with her? None. At least none of the ones who say that a man can, decide that inside he's a woman, or a white woman can decide that inside she's a black woman, or that violence in Berkeley is not real violence, but rather a protest against those mean and nasty conservatives who need to be stopped, and we choose not to call the violence violence. Instead, those who criticize the violence are the real violent ones. Catching on? Nothing is as it seems anymore. So if Elizabeth Warren wants to claim she's a Cherokee, nobody, not even the Cherokees, have a right to disagree. And if somebody does criticize her, the Democrats will simply play the gender card. Oh, they don't like Warren because they can't handle a woman president. Same retort that was given about Hillary, which is why I suggested in 2016 that Donald Trump should simply claim that he was also a woman. Who from the left could disagree? Oh, they all would, naturally, since they were hearing it from Trump, but they would not have been able to do so with any consistency. Then again, consistency is not needed when you're on the left. All that's needed is noise. And if they want, they can call the noise quiet. Because the only facts that exist anymore are facts we make up. Nothing is what it appears to be. Things are what we call them. In that vein, Trump and Trump supporters are still being called all kinds of things, from the likes of Hillary Clinton, who cannot seem to get over the fact that she lost. Same process. Oh, I didn't lose. I really won. I mean, I won the popular vote. Okay, we have an electoral college, but the Russians stole that. What? No evidence for that? Well, I would have won if we didn't have so many racists and misogynists. So President Trump is a misogynist. Actually, President Trump is nominating the very first female head of the CIA. Gee, that's funny. According to Hillary Clinton's latest blather, one of the reasons people voted for Trump is that they are threatened seeing women get jobs, her exact words. They are also supposedly threatened seeing African Americans have rights. But alas, that dose of confusion reared its head already when Ben Carson was put on the cabinet. And returning to the gender issue, let us not forget our UN ambassador, Nikki Haley. Actually, Nikki Haley also brings to mind Hillary's additional claim that Trump supporters don't want to see Indians succeed. Why then is Trump still so popular at his rallies if they're all a bunch of bigots who, according to Hillary's brilliant observation skills, must hate these cabinet picks? Are they consoling themselves with the tax cut and other promises that Trump was outrageous enough to keep? Or is it possible, just remotely possible, that the accusations about race and women are merely another helping portion of Clinton lies, the kind of lies that expose her willingness to say anything and throw a spotlight on the real reason Trump was elected? Of course, Trump, ever the businessman, is certainly doing as much firing as hiring, Whatever President Trump's reasons for firing one Secretary of State and nominating a new one, it sure would be nice if the nomination process could go on without us having to listen to Democrats pontificate for the cameras under the guise of asking questions. Somehow Gina Haspel, his pick for head of the CIA, will be accused of, you guessed it, racism. Thank you for playing. Because she was too harsh with the terrorists who hail from other countries, ergo racism. Yes, the racism is everywhere. When President Trump at a recent rally said Maxine Waters had a low IQ, I knew immediately that he would be accused of racism. What else could we possibly expect from the two-dimensional thinking of leftists? Leftists who love to offer lectures about how nuanced they are compared to the simple-minded conservatives. Never mind the plethora of people Trump has insulted, most of them white, as an equal opportunity insulter. Now, old stereotypes about race and intellect are a sad part of the history of this country, but that does not mean most people are taking them seriously anymore. And the very few that do only draw attention to their own fleeting IQs. And so, while the brilliance of people such as Ben Carson or Walter Williams or Harris Faulkner is indisputable, evidence for Maxine Waters' depletion of brain power has nothing to do with her skin color and everything to do with the fact that she talks like a blithering idiot. You're listening to The Bob Siegel Show. We'll be right back. Welcome back to 1170 The Answer. I'm your host, Bob Siegel. Coming up on our next our third segment of the show, an interview with Carl DeMaio. And regarding my show on February 18th, which featured Mayor Bill Wells, James wrote us on Facebook while the show was on the air saying, great show as always, Bob. Enjoying Mayor Wells and great Moody Blues bumper music. Responding to that same program and Mayor Wells' explanation about how many people now can steal $950 worth of goods from California stores without being prosecuted, Steve says, I am starting to get angry with our state with the homeless issue plus the $950 and it's just a ticket. Come on, what is this state coming to? I know. Still, it gets my blood boiling. Well, if you'd like to weigh in on anything said today, you can always reach us on Facebook, Twitter, or questions@bobsiegel.net. That's questions@bobsiegel.net. Regarding my comments about the Second Amendment, Jim says, I thought the Constitution was just a piece of paper. Well, Jim, it's a piece of paper with the law of our land written on it. Without this piece of paper, we would not be a republic. Without this piece of paper, you would not be a free man. Regarding my monologue on today's show about listening to the kids and its counterpart, Facebook version, I received all kinds of comments on Facebook. Everett Piper, president of Oklahoma Wesleyan University, says, this is so good. Tanya says, this is very good. Now, it was important for me to read both of those because they were different. One said good, one said very good. Don't worry, I also heard from people who hated it. I just don't like to start with them. Call me a romantic, but I like the positive comments better. They just seem to have a ring to them. Will says, excellent. Well, thank you, Will and Tanya and Everett. Much appreciated. About 100 others also liked it, including Lois, Patty, Allison, Ann, Margie, Al, James, Brendan, and Steve. Sean says, I would say that the inmates are running the asylum, but I've heard that liberals think that that is a racist slogan, so I won't say it. But if we think kids have it right, let's drop the voting age to 12 and let 16-year-olds run for president and Congress. Good grief. Very interesting point, Sean. Dave says, personally, I knew it all at 18. Each passing year has shown me how little I actually did know. I doubt I'm the only one. Same with me, Dave. Same with me. I appreciate your humility. It actually makes you wise, and wisdom is rare these days. Shirley says, remembering my own generation, by definition, teenagers are barely past puberty humans with unfinished brain development and raging hormone-laced emotions. Entertainment, physique, sleep, social media, sports, and makeup are random projects. They begin sentences with the pronouns me and him and her and use anyways as a universal conjunction. They may know the name of the president, but not the vice president as a universal, let's see, make sure I'm reading her correctly here. They may know the name of the president, but not the vice president, or heaven forbid, their own congressman. They have heard of Korea, but don't know where it is or why it's both north and south. They are stupid, but not dumb, immature, but not stagnant. They are our children, not our leaders. God help us to love them no matter what, to be your examples of wisdom and integrity and godly character. Very nicely said, Shirley. Now, Ken takes issue with me. He says I'm basing my whole opinion on two random people who said they agreed with a viewpoint different than mine, and so therefore I had the nerve to say teenagers don't know jack. Well, Ken, just like exactly how would you know that I am basing my whole opinion on two random people? I certainly made no such claim, and you were in no position to know otherwise. In fact, my exact words were that I listened to a lot of them. Yes, I shared two examples, and the point of those examples had nothing to do with whether or not they agreed with me, but rather that they had no facts or well-thought-out reasons to defend their voting decisions. If they had had facts and reasons, I still would have disagreed with them, but I would have at least admitted that they knew how to think. On the other hand, Russ liked what I had to say. Russ wrote, if you listen to the kids, you'll live on a diet of candy and Cheetos, and you will never attend a school or learn to become disciplined. Oh, wait, it seems that the left is doing that. And then we have a comment from Linda. Linda also takes issue with me. In the interest of all fairness, there are a lot of intelligent young people. It's sad that you feel you can generalize based on some stupid ones that you've interacted with. I had a fairly good head on my shoulders, even in high school. But you know what? I still get told at almost 30 that my views don't count because of my lack of experience. There are so many excuses for tossing aside the views of people you disagree with. Saying that you're young and stupid is the most annoying one I've heard yet. Well, I said there were exceptions, Linda. Few, yes, but exceptions. And I never said your views or anyone else's views don't count. I was talking about people, once again, who make comments and cannot support the comments with facts or reason, demonstrating that they are simply following the pack. And I challenge the idea that we should still accept what they have to say simply because they are young. If that does not apply to you, Linda, I take you at your word, and I'm very glad to hear it. I also was talking about the world of politics and those speaking out on news and current event issues, not intelligence in general. I was not, for example, claiming that teenagers could not do math. And I was not claiming that adults should automatically refuse to listen to kids. I was instead challenging the opposite point, that adults automatically should listen to kids. I was challenging the assumption that somehow the young should be listened to simply because they are young, without freedom to disagree with them, as if not agreeing means we are unloving or behind the times. I have spoken with many, as I also said, and was only sharing two of what could have been hundreds of examples. I spoke on college campuses for years. Most alarming are present-day universities, which time after time will no longer allow conservative speakers on their campus without them being suddenly canceled at the last minute or simply shouted down, often at the suggestion of faculty, which goes to my other point about there being idiotic adults, too. And so a great deal of my point has to do with the kind of education people are getting these days. Since you have, as you said, a good head on your shoulders, shall I assume you agree with my concern about education today? Either way, I stand by my words. While I have certainly met many wise young people, the wisest are the ones who can admit that they have a thing or two to learn from those who have had more experience in life and who are willing to be challenged with viewpoints they do not agree to without shouting people down. God bless. Now, regarding my comments about Hillary Clinton, Elizabeth Warren, Maxine Waters, David says, Bob, my fear is that one of the liberal leftist women will not only run, but win the next election. I truly expect to see Michelle Obama, Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, Hillary Clinton, Oprah Winfrey, one of them, on a ballot for 2020. It's scary to think that any of these feeble-minded liberals could become our next president. I'm not sure where the debate is on voter identity verification. At this point, I believe it is a necessary sacrifice, but it could also be turned against us in the future. As a nation, we need to pray daily for our politicians. We also need to make sure that every American votes on the next election. We will be right back with the Bob Siegel Show. Welcome back to 1170 The Answer. I'm your host, Bob Siegel. I'm going to introduce our very special guest. We're very honored to have him. Carl DeMaio is certainly no stranger to San Diego. He's a member of the Republican Party and served as a member of the San Diego City Council representing District 5 from 2008 to 2012. He also ran for mayor of San Diego in the 2012 election, losing to Bob Filner, and that is a shame. I will go out on a limb and suggest that Carl DeMaio would have been a much better mayor than Bob Filner. Carl also has his own talk radio show on another station, but today he has honored us by being on this station. Carl DeMaio, welcome to our program.
Hey, Bob, it's good to be with you on a Sunday night.
Well, it's a pleasure to meet you. Now, I know that I'd like to ask you questions about a lot of things, but I know that the biggest thing on your radar recently, at least from what we've been hearing, is the gas tax repeal that you're trying to get. So why don't you start with that?
Yeah, we have got to get this going. It's a big sucker punch in the whole cost of living war here in California. You know, when you think about how many times you fill up at the gas tank or the gas station, or if you think about the cost of your car, people think, well, maybe it's just a slight increase. The Reform California organization that I chaired conducted a research study where it looked at an average family of four. The wife drives a Ford Fusion. The husband drives a Jeep Wrangler. Certainly these are not extraordinarily expensive cars. They're average cars. They fill up once a week, and they have an average grocery bill. Their increased cost under the gas tax increase is $779.23 more a year. Now, cost of living is one thing about this gas tax and car tax hike. The other thing is fraud. You've got these politicians who say, oh, we promise this time we will use the money to fix the roads. We will deal with congestion. Guess what? Not a single sentence in the gas tax increase requires that they put it in the roads.
Isn't it true that money the government takes is hardly ever used for what they say it's going to be used for practically anything?
Correct. And in fact, if you take a look at the use of road repair or gas tax monies, only 20% of the gas tax that we currently pay goes anywhere near roads. Most of it's diverted to the general fund, pays for salaries and pension benefits for bureaucracies that have nothing to do with the roads. And a lot of it's being diverted to things like transit, bike lanes, and high-speed rail project. You know, I don't want to get into the debate over those issues, but the reality is this. If we are going to have roads, if we're going to be able to expand our freeways and highways, we absolutely must insist that every dime of our existing gas tax go in the roads. That's why this tax increase isn't even necessary. We have more than enough money to fix our roads, have the best roads in the country, if we only held the politicians accountable for taking the existing gas tax and putting it in the roads.
Well, I'd like to see the roads put back into the private sector anyway.
Well, you know, you obviously have public-private partnerships that you can embrace, but for roads that we use every day, we already pay for the best roads in the country, and yet we've got the worst roads in the country because the money's stolen.
Speaking of roads, Carl, how many people really want to drive to California and live here anymore anyway? What's your general opinion of all that's been going on here in this state, from us being a sanctuary state on out?
Oh, it's so depressing. I mean, I've heard, I think many folks know personal friends, family members who've left California in the last year, 2 years, 3 years. Why? Because California is no longer a state that offers opportunity. California is so expensive now. And our businesses, our jobs, our small businesses are crushed with regulation. And then if you are trying to make ends meet and live, it's what is it? The gas tax is higher, the water rates are higher, the taxes are higher. Then they sucker punch you with all these mandates. You can't even buy groceries anymore without being told you have to pay 10 cents a bag They said it was for the environment, but then they turn around and they say, but you can still buy plastic bags.
I've literally looked at clerks in supermarkets when they've asked me if I wanted to buy a bag, and I've started by saying that'll be the day. And then I've said, it's really, I said to them, I'm not blaming you. I know you didn't make this rule up, but it is the stupidest law I ever heard of. I have not met one store clerk yet that doesn't agree with me. They're all embarrassed by this thing.
Right. It's the do-gooders of the political class who think that they can tell us how to live our lives. But they know how we should live our lives better than we know how to live our lives. And that is the arrogance of the political class in this state. And it's unfortunately spreading around the country. But California used to be the golden state of opportunity. It used to be where you could, if you worked hard, if you had a good idea, anything could be yours. You'd be able to afford a home, raise a family. We used to have great schools, great roads, and yet now our schools are failing, our roads are crumbling, and our small businesses are drying up. They're literally leaving the state because they no longer can afford.
Yeah, now I'll give a shout out to my wife, who's a school principal, and I think she's still doing a pretty good job. However, I'm forced to agree with you that in general, our public schools are just on the decline.
Well, totally. But it all gets down to California's biggest problem, if you want to summarize the problem, is that we are the pay more, get less state. While other, sectors of society, whether it's business or nonprofits or families, are figuring out how to pay less and get more, in California, with the unions, the government unions, the mandates, the regulations, the high cost of living, what we're seeing is that we're paying more and more and more, and we're getting less. And that's why so many families are leaving the state. And it's heartbreaking because children and grandchildren of Californians who are now retired, they're leaving the state. And now those retired Californians are looking around saying, well, wait, if my kids and grandkids can't live nearby, maybe I should also sell my home and leave. So we see a mass exodus of individuals who've been here generationally, and that's a big loss. And as you mentioned, you have a political class that has taken the taxpayers and the citizens, the folks that contribute to our state. They've so mistreated them, abused them, taken them for granted, taken their money, given nothing in return. And where are they putting the resources? They're putting it behind sanctuary cities. They're putting it behind illegal immigrants.
They're showing more concern for non-citizens than citizens.
Exactly. And so here's what we're doing with the gas tax repeal. What we're trying to do is win one. We are literally trying to show that you can punch the schoolyard bully back and win one. And what we're trying to do is give hope to Californians who have felt like there's no way that we will ever win an election in this state. There's no way to undo the bad policies of Sacramento. Guess what? Come November, we're going to repeal the car and gas tax hikes. And then we are only getting started. Because after we repeal the car and gas tax hikes, we plan to go back and get our existing gas tax monies and put those in the roads. We plan to address the sanctuary state issue by repealing sanctuary state laws. And then we also intend to look at things like pension reform in government. What we're building is a political movement that is independent of the Republican Party, independent certainly of the Democratic Party, and is really engaged in taking issues directly to the ballot so voters can weigh in. And so I encourage people, if you want to fight the gas tax repeal, go to reformcalifornia.org, reformcalifornia.org, and join the effort.
Well, that sounds very optimistic. What's your view of judicial activism? Because there have been times when we've had ballot measures, even changed the Constitution in California, and it seems like we have a lot of narcissistic judges who just believe that they know better than us and believe it's their job to legislate from the bench. And so aren't we going to smack into that brick wall, no pun intended, with the wall Trump's trying to build?
We certainly have activist judges who are for more government interference in our lives. They are for bigger government, more taxation, bigger benefits in government because they themselves benefit from that machine. However, I've got to give a little bit of criticism to conservatives. Conservatives are loosey-goosey and sloppy. Some of them are really well-intended, but they don't get good lawyers. and they don't really sharpen what they're trying to do to make sure that they anticipate legal challenges in advance. Let me give you an example. When I filed the Pension Reform Initiative in 2012, I spent 3 years working with some of the best and brightest lawyers across the country, people who have litigated municipal pension law, people who know about vested contract rights, and they literally put together a ballot measure in the city of San Diego for me that was so legally unassailable. And I know that there are a lot of people out there saying, let's do more, let's try this, let's try that. And I said, I am only going to put ideas into our pension reform initiative that will withstand any challenge. And so guess what happened? We passed the pension reform initiative in 2012 in San Diego to move the city to a 401k pension program for new hires, to cap pension benefits for existing employees. And the unions have sued us 3 times since 2012. 3 times. We've gone before 3 separate judges. One of them is the most liberal judge in the San Diego Superior Court system. And guess what? In all 3 cases, we prevailed because we were very careful up front to make sure that whatever we pursued on the ballot was legally bulletproof. Now, on the gas tax repeal, I have a lot of people saying, well, we should do this, that, the other thing. I said, no, let's keep it simple. Constitutional amendment. No gas tax, no car tax shall be made effective until a vote of the people.
So you are trying to make it a constitutional amendment then, not just a...
Well, it's not just a constitutional amendment, but it's also looking at making sure that you're very clear about the terms and defining the terms.
Yeah, and that is so wise to think and embed in there ahead of time something impregnable to judicial activism.
Right. And again, they're going to try to look for ways to undo reform. But if you make it so common English plain to them what the initiative does, they cannot, with a straight face, any first-year law student would know that this is going to ultimately prevail in court. And so when I pull together these initiatives, I really look at how to make sure, starting out, that we anticipate all the legal challenges up front and that we make sure that we set expectations that are clear. We are going to repeal the gas tax and the car tax in November. We are going to strip the legislature of their ability to impose taxes without a vote of the people on cars and gas. And once that's done, then we are going to pivot and say, all right, the existing gas tax that we pay, we're going to mandate 100% of that has to go to roads. And we're going to define what the term road means. And by the way, for local maintenance, we're going to mandate 100% of our sales tax on cars will be used exclusively for local road maintenance and expansion. And so by defining with clarity and then giving legal standing to any citizen in the state to challenge that, whether it's a city government that says, well, we're not going to spend our sales tax from cars on roads, fine. We're going to sue you. We're going to do what the liberals do. We're going to go into court. We're going to sue you. We're going to say, hey, judge, see right here it says sales tax for all cars must be spent in this jurisdiction on road maintenance and or capacity improvement. And they haven't done this. And now what we want to do is mandate by court order that they have to segment this money. Give it to a receiver because you can't trust these people because they've broken the law. They've lied to us. You get strong language. You force it on these folks. And then if they don't do it, you sue them to high heaven. And guess what? They got to pay your legal bills. And so we got to start thinking like liberals in terms of how they've taken control of government. We can use their playbook, take control back.
Oh, yeah. I have to say they're a lot smarter than we are when it comes to the political area.
Well, because they spend every day thinking about government. We spend every day thinking about our families and our businesses and our hobbies.
Yeah.
They're all focused on government.
So it's understandable, but I agree with you 100%. We need to wise up. If you just joined us, my guest is Carl DeMaio. Carl, recently rumor had it that you were considering running for U.S. Congress and decided not to. Why did you decide to think about it? What made you decide to not run at this time? And are you thinking of running at some time in the future?
Well, I every cycle I get calls from my supporters who are wonderful, wonderful folks, and they're like, "Hey, we would love to see you in Washington, or we'd love to see you in Sacramento, or you should run for governor." And I'm very appreciative of their support, but I always look at where can I make the biggest difference. And I've done the elected route, serving on the San Diego City Council. And part of it was very, liberating, and the other part was very limiting. And so my view is, how do we get reform done in California? Can I do that as a member of Congress? Perhaps. Can I do that as a chairman of the most important issue in the state, to repeal the gas tax right now? That might be the better route. So I had and I was torn. I do believe that Congress is broken. We have Republicans in Congress who made promises. They've not kept their promise. They said they were going to build a wall. They didn't do it. They said they were going to repeal and replace Obamacare. They didn't do it. They said they were going to cut taxes for middle-class Americans. They kind of did it, but they really screwed it up. And so you go look at item after item after item, and you wonder, why the hell do we have a Republican majority? Now, it's better than a Democrat majority, but I just don't want to stop bad things. I want to get good things done. And I don't see that happening in Washington enough. And so part of me is just disgusted, fed up, frustrated with what's going on in Washington. And, the allure of being able to go back there and perhaps kick some rear end, speak out of school and say, here's what's really happening, like I did on San Diego City Council, much to the chagrin of a lot of Republicans and Democrats who were there. I had to take on a Republican mayor a number of times, but you need to get members of Congress back there who are not going to get seduced by the trappings of office, but who are going to remain faithful to what they promised. And so it was a very hard decision not to run, but I do believe the most important thing that I can do right now is make sure that we get this gas tax repeal qualified for the ballot and pass it in November.
Now, my next question is one that I'm guessing you've been asked quite often, so please forgive the predictability. But my honest intention is to ask this respectfully, just out of the sincere curiosity of my listeners. Since some of your viewpoints on matters such as abortion and same-sex marriage puts you at odds, I wouldn't say hostility, but at odds with many Republicans, I'm sure you would quickly point to other conservative issues that you do embrace. Obviously, a lot of these are fiscal, like you're concerned about the gas tax. But in your own words, what are some of the conservative issues you embrace? Should you find yourself in another election, what reason will people have to punch the ballot for you rather than a Democrat?
Well, a couple of things. There's a lot wrapped up in that question. First, I am running on a record. I don't care about credit. I want to get things done. When people see that I helped save the city of San Diego from bankruptcy, when other Republicans said, well, maybe we just have to give in and do a tax increase, and they actually supported a tax increase time and time again, I was the one that called out members of my own party for caving in to the Democrats, for caving into bigger government. And I said, no way, I'll fight you. I'll fight you in the streets. And we organized citizens to actually stop Republicans and Democrats from imposing tax increases. We then went on to save the city by reforming the pension system. So I pride myself on getting results. I am a libertarian at heart. I don't believe that government ought to have any business in your bedroom, in your pocketbook, or in your business. Less government is always better. I also believe in the golden rule, having been raised by the Jesuits. Treat others as you'd like to be treated yourself. And I think if we lived by the golden rule, the biblical concept of the golden rule, so many more issues in this society would be so much better for all concerned. The LGBT leadership hates my guts. I am their worst nightmare because I'm a conservative. I actually challenge the notion that all gays must be liberal, Democrat, progressive nutcases. I stand up and I hear from a lot of LGBT Americans who say, hey, I'm afraid to speak out and admit that I'm actually conservative on a lot of issues. And the LGBT leadership absolutely hates that. That's why the LGBT organizations have opposed me in each and every race I have ever run. Let me repeat that. LGBT organizations, Victory Fund, Equality California, have actively campaigned against me in each of my races.
You probably have a little bit in common with Tammy Bruce in that regard, then.
It's supporting straight elected officials who just so happen to be Democrat. And so it shows the hypocrisy. There is no such thing as an LGBT organization anymore in this country. Because, look, those issues are past, okay? Just give it a rest. No, those organizations are no longer LGBT organizations. They're Democrat, progressive, activist organizations. They're campaign organizations. They masquerade as 501c3s when, in fact, they're extensions of the Democratic Party. It's interesting in that as a libertarian, I don't believe that the issue of abortion is one that, we can solve through government. I think that we should work to reduce the number of abortions in this country by supporting women, by trying to show them that there are so many other alternatives to an abortion, by improving family planning knowledge and education. Technology, I think, will help us reduce abortions. But Planned Parenthood has opposed me in each of my elections. It's stunning. And again, it gets back to this issue. Planned Parenthood is not a women's health organization. They're not even an abortion organization. Planned Parenthood is an extension of the Democratic Party. Their goal is to instill fear in women and people who may say, well, government shouldn't be involved in the issue of choice, so that they vote against Democrats. And this is the whole dog whistle of liberal politics, is they set up these identity politics groups and try to scare the crap out of people with those views. It is all about political party. It's all about power. And so I'm the guy who kind of comes along that really makes it hard for them. I think when conservatives see my record, I don't get the question very often. In fact, they say, hey, we love the fact that you're conservative and gay. We don't care who you love or who you're with. We don't care about those issues. That's so 1995.
Well, I would agree with that.
For God's sake.
I would agree with that. As a Christian and a conservative, I have my own opinions, but we're living in America, and you have a right to live any kind of lifestyle you want. What would concern me, and I think you would probably agree with this based on what I'm hearing you say, is when a Christian baker is sued because he doesn't want to artistically write on top of a cake for a gay wedding, would you support his rights to have his freedoms?
Oh, absolutely. And here's the thing I point out. Knowing the gay community as much as I know them, look, no gay man wants to eat a wedding cake, okay? They don't like carbohydrates. They don't like sugar. If it were like a bottle of vodka, sure, they'd be involved with that. But this was nothing more than a setup. These are liberal organizations that shopped around to find the one baker who says, look, I don't particularly like this. I'm not going to engage in it. I'll sell you a cake, but I'm not going to write on it.
Yeah, and tell me if you agree. I'm of the opinion that the militant gay activists are not really speaking for the majority of gay people in our country.
No, I talked to
most of them probably just want to be left alone and live in peace.
Yeah, they're like, what? Why are we fighting over wedding cakes? We don't even eat wedding cakes, for God's sake. Move along. So, again, this is one of those issues where if you believe in the First Amendment, and the First Amendment is really about freedom of thought, it's so beautiful in how our founders wound up so many elements into the First Amendment, ultimately saying that individuals have freedom of thought. And that's an extension. You see freedom of thought through freedom of speech, freedom of religion. Sometimes you want to share your thoughts with others, so we have freedom of assembly. And other times you want to publicize your thoughts, which is freedom of the press. The media loves to say, well, freedom of the press is here, and, boy, it's an important issue. That's not what the founders were thinking. The founders ultimately were saying that each individual, whether they're CNN or whether they're a minister preaching from the pulpit, they have freedom of thought, and government may not infringe upon that. And so if someone says, look, I don't particularly want to express a gay wedding message on my cakes, so be it. you can always find another baker.
Now, with the pro-choice position, though, it sounds like you would take the libertarian position. That's how you would arrive at being pro-choice.
I'm also a pragmatist. Any Republican who says, "Oh, we're going to make America a pro-life country," is lying to you. They're simply trying to generate your support on the pro-life issue. I'm honest. I'm saying very clearly, having studied the issue, I don't see our courts moving away from a quote-unquote choice regime. And so I would rather have our ministers, I'd rather have our faith-based organizations, our community groups be realistic and focus on how you reach out to each and every individual out there and create a culture of life. How do we find ways so that we can reduce the number of abortions in this country? It's very seductive to say, just vote pro-life and all the abortions will disappear.
Well, but
really?
Hypothetically...
Seriously. How many times have we heard politicians say that, and what has happened? It has now been almost 50 years.
Yeah. Well, granted,
so
politicians
let's hold our politicians accountable for creating progress on reducing the number of abortions and getting out there and showing people that there are so many other alternatives and that they don't want to regret this decision in 20 years.
Well, granted, politicians don't do a very good job of keeping their promises, but hypothetically, if it was possible, wouldn't the idea of libertarianism and rights extend to the right of the unborn as well? Wouldn't a champion for women's rights also be concerned about baby women? I mean, it sounds like you and I are kindred spirits on just about everything. I think this is the only one I would push back on a little bit because it seems that it always sounds good. Yeah, the government should get out of the bedroom. And we could say, okay, even if we made it illegal, abortions are still going to happen. Well, yeah, murder's illegal and murder still happens. Wouldn't hypothetically the ideal still be to fight for that, though?
The ideal is to fight for individual freedom, ultimately. And I hope that people make the right choice, which is to choose life. And what we have to do is, instead of being seduced by lazy thought of, "Whoa, I'm pro-life, so I can just check the box and I'm done." No. Being pro-life is hard work. Being pro-life means that you have to reach out to each individual and convince them that every human life is precious. That's not going to be done by government. It will be done by you and me, though.
Yeah. Well, I think we should at least try in the government. Carl, we're out of time. Listen, it was an absolute pleasure to meet you finally in person.
Thanks for having me on. We had a great time.
I hope you would honor us and come on again sometime.
Absolutely.
God bless you, my friend.